Welcome to Now We're Getting Somewhere. I'm Katie, and I'm a certified life coach, but I've also been a management consultant at McKinsey and a product manager at a tech startup. In other words, I know what it feels like to have a life that looks pretty good on paper, but doesn't feel as good as I want it to. I help my professional clients develop lives that are more meaningful, happy, and also more successful. And I want to share the same practical insights with you. Let's go. Hey, everybody. I wrote some time ago a piece for my blog and my newsletter about what I'd learned from friendship from watching my dad. And despite the fact that I am supposedly the one who is a skillful life coach who has lots of ideas and concepts of my own, it has turned out that it is, in fact, this piece about my dad that people tell me over and over really touched them and really stayed with them. I ran into a very old friend I hadn't seen in several years at a coffee shop, and she told me that she has implemented several of the ideas in this piece. I also started working with a new client recently, and he told me that it was this piece, which I wrote several years ago, that first turned him on to my work and made him really like the work that I do. So today, I thought I would revisit this piece and these ideas, and I would put some of the ideas from that original piece into a podcast with some edits and a bit more detail. So whether you missed my original essay or maybe you just loved it and want to hear it again, I hope you'll get a chance to really soak up these great ideas and insights from my dad today. So with that context, here we go. My dad is a 77-year-old man who loves bow ties, bel canto opera, and military history. He also, I have come to realize, has some pretty great insights on friendship. As a young lawyer at a big firm, my dad was always able to find someone down the hall to have lunch with. And for the modern lawyers listening to this, my dad would say, I think, this was a different time. Lawyers at big firms actually took lunch breaks back then. But then a decade into his career, my dad went out on his own. He got his own office, he hung his own shingle, and he found that he wasn't seeing friends nearly as much. He was kind of lonely. So he took matters into his own hands and he started inviting people out to lunch. In fact, he made a list of everyone that he wanted to see more of, and he went down that list, calling up people and scheduling several lunches a week as a way of breaking up his workday. And when he finished the list, he started again at the top. And as a result, my dad has had several social lunches per week for decades. He is a pretty upbeat guy, and I attribute that to many things, but I genuinely think that one of them is his regular social interaction. He and I were talking about his lunches some time ago, and there were two things that, honestly, I thought that I could learn from them, and I wonder if they will be helpful to you too. The first one is, my dad is extremely intentional about his friendships. And in fairness, I don't think that my dad would even use the word intentional. I think that's the kind of word that his life coach daughter likes. But what other word can you use for a man who has a literal list of friendships that he wants to maintain and goes down that list on a regular basis, making sure that he calls up each person and then starts again at the top once he finishes? So that's the first thing I thought I could learn. My dad is very intentional about his friendships. And number two, my dad is comfortable doing 100% of the initiating. This is, in my opinion, perhaps the most radical point of all. For virtually all of his lunches, my dad initiates the social plans. I asked him once, hey, Dad, do you ever worry that maybe these people aren't initiating back because maybe they don't like you as much as you like them? And to me, he gave a very good-natured shrug, as is, in fairness, often his way. And he said to me, I guess I could worry about that, but then I might stop asking people out to lunch. And what good would that do me or them? He did tell me that he thinks at least some of his friends will casually mention that they don't socialize that much with anyone. And that makes sense to me. When I did some sleuthing into the data when I was putting this together, I did find some statistics suggesting that the average American spends less than a half hour a day on average on any non-work socializing and communicating. And that actually includes time with one spouse. So we're just not doing a lot of socializing. And those others, maybe the others who do seem to perhaps socialize with others, but don't actually necessarily ask my dad to hang out so much. I was curious what he thinks about them. To that, my dad said, you know what? If they seem to be having a nice time with me, and if I'm having a nice time with them, I honestly don't worry whether they're initiating or not. Oh, truthfully, team, this is not how I have typically approached friendships. Quite the opposite, in fact. In the past, I would be totally okay initiating the first time, but if I felt that it was only me doing the initiating, I would stop reaching out to that person. I would worry that secretly they didn't like me as much as I liked them, and that idea made me feel very uncomfortable. But I've been thinking in general that maybe I should at least worry a little bit less about, exact reciprocity in initiating. Since reading Shasta Nelson's work on friendships, I referenced some of that in episode 16 of my podcast, which is about practical ideas for adult friendships. But then really having my dad as this kind of living, breathing role model has pushed me even farther in that direction. So I can't say that I am as comfortable as my dad at doing 100% of the initiating. I do still want some reciprocity, and Carlton is really the Jedi in this way. But watching him, talking to him has made me feel more comfortable doing much more of it. And in thinking, maybe the people that I'm reaching out to, maybe they're lonely. Maybe they will be so grateful that I am doing the initiating. And one more thing, for those of you who are listening to this, with jaws agape, perhaps thinking, I do not have time for several social lunches a week. I hear you. As an introverted working mom with 2 young kids, I hear you. And I will say that even my dad's lunch frequency varied. So he spent the last decade of his working life as a judge rather than a lawyer. So he had less lunchtime flexibility versus when he had been this self-employed lawyer. And as a result, the frequency of his social lunches, it did decrease dramatically. So if you're in a busy season of life, I don't think you have to get too fixated on this, several social lunches per week thing. I think the 2 lessons still hold for however often you feel up to socializing. Overall, I offer my dad's story to you today if it's a helpful nudge. Could it be that the missing ingredient to a satisfying, meaningful social life and life in general is being willing to intentionally decide who you want to see and then be willing to do most of the work to see them? You might not have to do all the work. You probably won't, but just a willingness to do all or most of the work. On one hand, this idea feels radical, at least it does to me. But what if it isn't? What if it's just a willingness to say, hey, most people are lonely. Many people are bad at initiating. And could I help them and me, frankly, feel more socially connected? Because, and I know we all know this, regular friendship interaction can be an astonishingly effective tool for happiness, stress relief, and even momentum in other areas of your life. So, with that in mind, should we all channel Carlton Seaver this week? If so, I suggest you start with a nautical bow tie, that you turn on some Donizetti or some Verdi, and you get ready to talk to your favorite daughter about your time in the Navy or the wonders of General Joshua Chamberlain in the Battle of Gettysburg. As always, I'm rooting for you. Bye, everyone. If you really want to change in a meaningful, lasting way, that's when you need a life coach. Every client I've worked with has had incredibly personalized reasons why they're in the tired or anxious or stuck or uninspired state they're in. Working with me can help you identify those roadblocks, which are usually blind spots that you genuinely cannot see, and implement a profoundly customized, doable plan for overcoming them. I have a very small, high-end, one-on-one coaching practice. If you'd like to be my next client, reach out at katiesiever.com. I'd love to meet you.